I sent out an email about the Deloitte meeting. Deloitte is one of the big four CPA firms. They're one of the biggest CPA firms in the world, one of the largest consulting firms in the world, and a really good company to, or CPA firm, I should say, to get into if you can. It's a really good career move. But anyway, they are having a Zoom meeting at Thursday at 4 p.m. and they sent out an email with a link to it. But if it can really look good to have that, even if you don't stay with a firm, if you get into a CPA firm, it really opens a lot of doors for you. And Deloitte will open more doors than almost anyone else. So it's a very good firm to be in with. Big Four, any of the big four firms are good to be in with. Deloitte's growing, so a lot of opportunities and stuff there. But anyway, there's a Zoom meeting at 4 p.m. on Thursday, and I would encourage, if you can, to make that. Okay, we're going to do the sampling practice exam. And then I'll send out the sampling exam after class, and then we'll continue the chapter 7 handout. I'm not sure if we'll finish it or not, but we'll give it a try. Okay, so let's go to sampling practice exam. Okay, so there are, I think, 5 problems on here. Let me check to make sure I'm not lying to you. Ha, I am lying to you. There's 4 problems on here. There's 2. There's the first one's test controls. The second one is the classical sampling, and then there's 2 on the monetary unit sampling. So we will go ahead and go through here. Okay. So test controls, I took a sample of 300 purchase orders. Our allows for an error rate of okay, so 300 purchase orders. So we're looking at the manager signs all of the purchase orders. Now notice there is no dollars involved on this. There's no dollars because these are tests of control. So do they sign on the purchase order or not? What amounts on the purchase order isn't part of this control. It's the control that the manager signed the purchase order. Okay. So what is the error rate? Want to take a stab at it?
Would that be 6%?
I think it's 3. Let me check. It'll be 3. The errors are 15 over 300, whatever that is.
Sorry for being a few minutes late. I'm just trying to get caught up. This is a new document, right?
Yeah, it's in Blackboard. It's also it should be in the email. It's a sampling practice exam. I think it's the same.
I got it. Thank you.
And this will be, just so you guys know, this will be what the exam will look like. The reason I'm doing this is because I used to not give a practice exam, you say, okay, we can use your notes, which obviously you can, but it seems like it's got a lot of errors, people, especially things like the mean per unit and ratio and all that kind of stuff we did so long ago. So anyway, kind of good refresher. So anyway, so this is 15 divided by 300. I think it's 0.05, I think, right? Okay, so the error rate. So this is our best estimate of what the true error rate is. Now, we also have this allowance for sampling risk, though. So it kind of looks like, that's not that. So it's going to kind of look like, so if this is 100%, so we're saying this is at 5%, and that's our best estimate. But now, because this is a sample, it could be worse by 3% allowance. See, allowance for sampling risk is 3%. So we're saying that this could be actually 3% worse. So what we're saying is 5% is our best estimate, but it could be 3% worse. So in this case, the upper limit would be 8%. So here's our best estimate. But again, this is a sample, so it could be worse. And it could go down to 3%. And so this would be our upper limit. It'd be 8%. So let's see here. Going back to, not that. There we go. So we have the error rate. %, plus so can we rely on this? The error rate is 6%.
We say no.
Nope. If we're going to have a allowable error rate of 6%, then no, because this is could be off by as much as 8%. So comparing those two, it would be no. I get that when we say allowable error.
Could you describe how the allowance works?
Yeah, the allowance is it's a basically it's if you take a sample, it harkens back to the normal distribution. Now, truthfully, usually you'll see this as a bell curve, be +3 or -3. What we're doing here doesn't really apply because you're worried about what the upper limit is on the error rate. But the idea is that if you take a sample, that it could be off by a larger amount, depending on what it is. Now, you might have it at the 90% level of confidence, 95% level. There's always some percent level of confidence that you'd have. But let's say this is 95, or 95%. Let's say this is at the 95% level. You're saying that that it could be off by another 3% because your sample, depending on how big a sample you have, it might be good, but it isn't, as long as it's a sample, it's not going to be perfect. So there's going to be some amount that it's off by. And, if it depends on how confident you want to be too, because if you go to say 99%, it would be up here somewhere, or if you went to 90%, it'd be down here somewhere. I don't know what I'm just making these numbers up, but oops, I hit it wrong. 99, this would be 90. The more, given the same sample, the more confident you want to be, you have to allow for more. So it really depends on how confident do you want to be that you're covering everything, and so this is the extra 3% here is because it's a sample. They've never tested, I don't think, on how you come up with those on the CPA exam, but it's a normal distribution. Truthfully, you could also do it with a binomial distribution, but the normal distribution is the one that's most commonly used. So so you'll have an allowable rate, and this has to be lower than the upper limit. If the upper limit, sorry about that. So if the upper limit is higher, so this cannot be relied upon. Now, this is not to take judgment out of it. Coming up with a coming up with an error rate. How do you come up with that error rate? Well, that's a judgment call. How do you come up with what the allowance is going to be? You can do it at the 90% level, the 95% level, the 99% level. What level of confidence do you want to have? Those are all judgment calls. It isn't that there's, sampling takes out the judgment. It doesn't. It doesn't take it out at all. It just quantifies it. So it says, okay, if you want to be 6, if the most that you'll allow this to be off by is 6%, you got to compare that to the upper limit, what it could be off by based on your sample. And based on your sample, it could be off by as much as 8%. So based on your sample, you would reject this and say, look, I can't rely on this for our audit plan. So we cannot rely on the internal controls. And here's a trick question. Oops. The question is, I don't know how to use a keyboard. What is the misstatement of the purchases? How much are they misstated by? That's right. It's unknown, right? Because it might not be misstated at all. So it's unknown. Testing controls are not a set of misstatements. It's possible that these aren't misstated at all. And that's another quirky thing about internal control. So what is the misstatement of the purchases? It's unknown. They might be fine. Another thing about controls is just because there's a misstatement, an error in the internal controls, you can't rely upon them. That does not mean the financial statements are necessarily misstated. It could just be that the control can't be relied upon. The financial statements might be fine. For instance, in this case, even though managers didn't sign off on 15 of the purchase orders, that doesn't necessarily mean that those purchase orders weren't valid and weren't completed and weren't necessary for the business and all that kind of stuff. It just says that this control can't be relied upon. And when you're testing controls, you want to be able to rely on the controls because it will reduce your substantive testing. So the whole purpose of testing internal controls is that you can rely on them and say, okay, these controls are good, so we can go ahead with our planned amount of substantive testing for the dollar amounts, testing to see if these things are misstated. If we can rely on the controls, we can go ahead with our plan for the substantive testing. We can't rely on the controls. Okay, now we got to go to, plan B, which is what do you do if the controls aren't, if you can't rely on them. So that's kind of where we're at down here. So how would the results of this test impact the planned substantive tests of 500 items? Oops. So we plan on testing 500 items, and these are the ones we're testing for the dollar amounts. So if we planned on test, so we had our audit plan, we were going to test the controls, and then we're going to have substantive tests of 500 items, but we can't rely on the controls. So I'll give you a few choices. Will we increase the substantive tests, decrease the substantive tests, or leave them the same? What do you think? So we had planned on substantive tests for 500 items, asked if we could rely on the internal controls. We found out we can't rely on the internal controls. So what do we do? And by the way, usually if you can't rely on the internal controls, there's no reason to test them further. It's possible you came up with a bad sample, depending on what, your 95% level or whatever it was. But if you can't rely on the controls, usually more testing doesn't help, although it could if you just happen to take a bad sample. But well, let's assume that you're not going to take another sample of the substantive or the tested controls. So are you going to do more or less of the substantive testing?
Less.
Actually more. You're going to bump it up, because you say, okay, we can't rely on these controls. So even though there might not be anything wrong, there's more likelihood that there could be more misstatements than we thought, because we were shooting for an error rate of 6% and the upper limit's 8%. So there could be more errors than we thought. So you will increase the substantive test. So material misstatements are more likely. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are materially misstated, but it means that they're more likely that they are. So again, and this is, and substantive testing is when you look at the dollar amounts, and that's what these other tests are. Classical sampling, look at the dollars and all that. But yeah, so substantive tests are for the dollar amounts, and if we can't rely on the controls, then you say, okay, fine, we can't rely on the controls. We got to bump up the substantive testing. Okay. Is this test required by the AICPA? No. It is only required. Let me write this differently. Okay. So are these, is this test required? No, test controls are only required if the other plans are relying on the test of controls to, let's say, the internal controls. So if you're not planning on relying on the test of control, so for instance, if you, and it could be you go to an audit, you go, okay, look, I'm not going to do any test of controls. I'm just going to do a bunch more substantive testing. If you're not going to rely on the internal controls, you don't have to use test of controls. Okay, so I'm going to clarify this a little bit more. Put down here. I know this is going to be confusing, but this actually goes into chapter 7. Like we're going before. Okay, so no, they're not required to do this testing. They're only required if they're going to rely on it. However, they are required to obtain an understanding of internal control. So you must get an understanding of how their controls work. The idea being you won't know what to look for unless you get an understanding of it. However, if you're not going to rely on it, you get an understanding of it. You don't do any testing. Then you just do the substantive testing. If you are going to rely on it, you get an understanding of internal controls. Then you test those controls, see if they're working, and then you do the substantive testing. But the idea is that you must get an understanding of it, of the internal controls. Everyone has to get that. It's required that you get an understanding of internal controls. However, you don't have to test them unless you're going to rely on them. I know it's kind of a funny way of doing it, but that's those are the rules. So all auditors must get an understanding of it, regardless of whether you're going to rely on them or not. If you're going to rely on them, then you have to do the testing. Okay. Any question on that? And again, testing controls are a little bit confusing. I shouldn't say confusing. They're a little bit awkward because they're no dollar amounts. It's all just yeses or nos basically. And so you don't find material misstatements doing test of controls, but you can find where the misstatements are more likely by doing test of controls. And that's the big benefit of it, that you can reduce other testing and get more focused substantive testing. You might find one area that, in the same group, purchase orders, that, you might find these other categories that are solid, they have no errors. And then you have this other category that does. So you say, okay, we're going to concentrate on this type of transaction, because that's what the test controls tell us, that, if there's a problem, it's probably going to be on this end. Okay. Classical sampling. This one is probably the most intuitive of all of them. So let's go to our sample. Okay, first thing we need to do is mess up our spacing, and then we got to find the audit average of the sample. So we have 52,000 divided by 1,000. It's $52. So that's the audit value. We'll make that. Oops. All right. So the audit average is 52. And the book average is 50. Okay. And it's coming down here. Hopefully by now you guys are getting kind of used to just the terminology, that it kind of tells you what to do, when you look at the mean per unit, ratio estimation, all that. Mean per unit just means the average. And whose average is more persuasive, our average or the book average? So which one is more persuasive, the auditor's work or the work of our client?
Would it be the auditors?
Yeah. Oops, what did I do here? Yeah, so this is more persuasive. Oops. Yeah, anytime your own work is going to be more persuasive than something someone else hands you. So when we talk about the mean per unit, you say, well, which mean are we going to use? Which average are we going to use? You're going to use the audit average, because that's when you're is more reliable. Okay, so we're going to take so what we're going to say is this. Okay, we did our test and we came up with 52 as the average, and we're going to say, look at all of the accounts receivable, 8,000. All 8,000 should be $52. The number of accounts receivable. This will be our projected value. We'll make that turquoise. How about okay, so 52 times 8,000 is some number. We want something more specific than this sub number. 8,000 times 52. 416,000. So this would be our projected value. Okay, so what is the projected misstatement? Oh, come on, you guys are toying with me. We're saying that they're, what are these?
36,000.
Yes. Yeah, the 380. So the book value, the book value is 380,000. So the misstatement will be projected misstatement will be 36,000. Is that an overstatement or understatement? Oops.
Understated.
Yep. Yeah, so these are understated. These are, it's lower than what we, we're saying it is 416,000. They're saying it's 380,000. So they are understated by 36,000. And the weird thing about the mean per unit is that it only takes into account the audit average. It ignores the book average. So if you're using this mean per unit method, you actually don't even need to do this. All right. Ratio estimation. Okay, so ratio estimation is it says that everything's off by a ratio, and I think I told you, mentioned this in the past. I'm sure I have. That it is, I think it's theoretically probably the best of them, because what it says is that large items will be off by large amounts if they're off. Excuse me, small items will be off by small amounts. And it's kind of intuitive. If you think about like a $50 account, it'd be very unusual if it was off by $5,000. $50 account may be off by $5 or something, usually. But to be now you take a $300,000 account and it might be off by 5,000. That's kind of plausible that it would happen. So ratio estimation says that large large items off by large amounts, small items off by small amounts. And I think that's probably most of the way the world is, but. Okay, so we're gonna take our audit average. And, oops, divided by, I didn't put the audit average in there, did I? Oh, that's not the audit average. So take the audit average and we're divided by the book average. And one of the weird things, if you forget which goes on top, which goes on the bottom, it's alphabetical. A, B. There's a ton of things in accounting that are like that. I have to thought if I write a book, I'll just say, by the way, here's something weird. Oops, wait, we gotta multiply this times. The total book value is 380,000. And this will equal the projected mistake, whatever that is. $52 divided by 50 times 1,000. 395,200. So that's the projected value. And so the projected misstatement, I'm just going to cut and paste this here. What is that? 15,200, I think. You want to check that. And overstated or understated?
Understated again.
Yep. Yeah, we're saying it should be 395. They're saying it's 380. So this is understated by 15,200. Okay, difference estimation is, again, saying what it says, different. And this one is a little bit odd in that difference estimation is sort of the opposite of ratio. And that ratio says large items are off by large amounts, small ones are off by small amounts. Difference estimation says no, doesn't matter if it's a $50 account or a $50,000 account. If it's off, it's going to be off by the same amount. And there are some times that that could be the case. And if it is, this is the one to use. So it's saying that everything will be off. If anything is off, it's going to be off by the same amount. And this one is a little bit quirky too, because it starts out with you find that the misstatement first. So this gives us our difference. This is $2. So here's what they're saying. Everything is going to be off by $2. So all 8,000 items, I think I'm just going to copy this from up here. That we're saying, okay, every single item is going to be off by the same amount. Everything's going to be off by $2. Well, that's what the difference estimation is. It says that everything is off by the same amount. Doesn't matter what size it is. Okay. Yeah, 16,000. It's just 16,000. And this is the projected misstatement. So it's sort of like we're coming down here first. Now, if we're adding, if we say they need to add $2 for each one, is this going to be an understatement or an overstatement? They're saying that their average is 50. We're saying it should be 52. It should be, you should add $2 to each one of these.
Also understated.
Yep. Yeah, we're saying that, they're saying it's $50. We're saying it should be 52. All right, and now we have to find the projected projected value, and we're saying is 308,000 plus 16, so this will be the projected. So you're kind of like backing into it. $396. Oops. Okay, now, so you'll notice that, unlike this first one here, this one, we don't know what the misstatements were because we're not testing the dollar amounts. Down here, these are the dollar amounts. These are the ones that we're going to use to say, okay, these books are misstated by some amount. And, it's a judgment call whether that's material or not. If it's off by 16,000, is that material? It's a judgment call. But, the testing should all be the same, and that everyone will get the same result from the test, whatever method you're using. And again, it's a judgment call as well, whether they're going to be materially misstated or not. But so these are actually to find the misstatements for the dollar amounts. And I think these are probably the most intuitive one. The classical sampling is kind of the one that most people would, if you weren't told how to do it, this is probably, you'd probably come up with one of these methods of projecting it, over the population as a whole. So we go from the, the intuitive one to the wildly unintuitive. Monitor unit sampling. And the first we're going to do is do the sample size. I should ask you, are there any questions on the classical sampling? Any questions on that? Okay. Let's go ahead and push on through. Oops. The spacing here is funny. Okay, so we're going to get the sample size and sampling interval. And here is our formula. Okay, so first thing in the formula we need is our total book value, which is that. Underneath it, we have our tolerable misstatement. Which is that. And our expected misstatement. Which is that. And now we need to get the wacky ones. And these are the two wacky ones. Reliability and the expansion factor. So let's do the reliability factor first. We'll go down here. And, what risk of incorrect acceptance is 10%. So coming down here, use row 0 for sample size, which is what we're doing. It's 10%, right? 10%. And so 231 is going to be our factor that we use up here. So this will be 2.31. And do the expansion factor. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I have a dog that's I got a dog that weighs like 15 pounds. That's ready to throw down with anything on the planet. Anyway, okay, so expansion factor. Nice thing about expansion factor is you don't have to worry about what row it's in. There's only one number for each. And so it'll look like this. So 10%, the factor is 1.5. I'm just going to do it up here. Okay, so the top one would look like this. 500,000 times 2.31 is, remember, $1,155,000. And down here, 1200 times 1.5 is what, 1800? So this is divided by 30,000 minus 1,800. 1,200 times 1.5 is 1,800. This look worse. So this would equal 3,000 minus 1,800 is 28,200. 8,200. That equals 40.95. And this one, the real method is you round up, and this one would obviously round up to 41. And I think I told you before, I would probably round up no matter what it is. But the true method, the true method is you round it off to the nearest one, but in this one it would round off to 41. So there can be 41 items. Oh, I did something weird with the spacing here. Oh, I see what I did. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this would be the 41 items. And sample size, we get the total book value. Divided by the sample size. And that will equal some number. Uh, 12,195 and 12 cents. You can just put the nearest dollar if you want. Oh, what did I do there? Yeah. My formatting here isn't the best. But anyway, so this would be the sampling interval. My formatting is not the best on this one. Okay, question on that? And now the beauty of this method, one of the beauties of it is when you pick the sample there, I know it seems kind of cumbersome the way we just did it, but actually it's extremely fast. There is no taking a preliminary sample, finding, standard deviation, all the stuff you have to do for the other methods. But, and it does two things. It not only tells you how many items to take, it also picks your sample, because it's going to say, okay, every $12,195 worth of stuff, you're going to pick your next one. So it also picks our sample for us. There's no random number table we use or anything like that. It'll pick our sample for us. And any item that's more than $12,195 is automatically picked. So if management is trying to, bump up their sales or whatever and put fictitious sales on the books, by increasing an account or something like that, if it goes over $12,195, it's automatically you're going to catch it. So the more they cheat, the more likely they're going to get caught. So that's kind of the beauty of this method. Okay, I tell you what, let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll do this monetary sampling. Let's say be back. What time is it? 7? Say 7:10. Okay, so we'll be back at 7:10, and I'll go settle down my ferocious 15-pound dog. By the way, it looks just like this. Okay, so let's take a look at the, let's get rid of this. What are unit sampling? And this, the way this is laid out is it's pretty much identical to the way it was tested on the CPA exam, at least a couple times, maybe even more. Okay. So let's see, we have this risk of incorrect acceptance. Okay, so we're going to come down here and we found 3 misstatements. And so we want to know what the projected misstatement is and if it's going to be included in the incremental allowance. All right, so this first one. The first one's an unusual one. What's unusual about the first one? Anyone?
The audit value is higher.
Yeah, this is an understatement. We're not supposed to find these. The audit value is higher than the book value. And when we find one, and I know this as an auditor, this is one of those things that kind of makes you wince, but you find an error. What do you do with it? You don't do anything with it. If it is an understatement, we ignore it. Does it include the internal incremental allowance? No. And it wouldn't matter if it was because there's 0 misstatement. So if you multiply anything by 0, it's not going to make any difference. But anyway, it's not misstated and definitely not in the incremental allowance. Although even if it was, it wouldn't matter. So it's 0. Okay, the next one is a more run-of-the-mill one. We're going to take these 2 items. You'll notice that this is an overstatement. So 80 divided by 200, oops, times our interval. And this will give us our projected value. Let's go ahead and do it first. Okay, so got my calculator cam. What am I doing here? So 80 divided by 200 equals 0.4 times 5,000. So the projected value is 2,000 for this interval. So what's the projected misstatement? So the interval we're saying is really only worth 2,000, not 5,000. So the misstatement is the rest, 3,000.
3,000.
And now this is a real misstatement. This is, now notice that the book value of this item was 200, and this is for an interval of 5,000. So there could be more things that are wrong, and that the more misstatements you have, the more likely there are more misstatements. So it also has sort of an idea that, if you do find incidents where it's off, that because this is a sample, it's likely there are more of those out there. So if there's still room left in that sample, that interval, we say, okay, there still could be more of it off there. And so this does go into the incremental allowance. It could be off by more. We found, this one was for 200. There could be many more in this interval, and the fact that there is an error means it's more likely there are more errors. So this incremental allowance comes down here, come down here to that wacky thing. Okay, so this one's kind of straightforward. The next one, there's something wacky about this one. The third one here. What's wacky?
It's higher than the interval.
Yep. Yeah, you'll notice that the book value item is greater than the interval. This is a good example of something that is 100% certain to be caught. And notice that if this is management trying to inflate the numbers, what they did by bumping this up to 5,400 is guarantee that it'll be caught. At 4,500, it is probably likely to be caught, but the minute that goes over 5,000, it's automatic, it's going to get caught, which is, again, the beauty of this method. Now, if this is the case, we don't do the ratio thing here. Instead, we just take the actual misstatement because it'll be higher. So that would be 5,400. $900. So this 900 is what we will include here over here. Now, notice that this interval could not get any worse. That this interval is, this item completely covers this interval. Nothing else could go wrong in this interval. So this item is not included. And so when it comes to the incremental allowance, there's only one of these that's going to be there. Well, this one's not a misstatement at all. The first one's not a misstatement at all, which I know is strange, but, and then this one, it is a misstatement, but it could not get any worse. It's as bad as it's going to get for that interval. So these together will be our projected $3,900. And by the way, this is our best estimate. As far as what these books are misstated by. So it's our best estimate of what they're misstated by. Now, it could be worse. This is a sample, so it could be worse than this, but this is going to be our best estimate. Okay, so so here, this thing out. It look like this. The book value of the accounts receivable is 400,000. Our best estimate is that this is off by 3,900. So this is our projected value. But again, this is a sample. So we're going to have two more things that we're going to add to this. We're going to add the basic precision. Then we're going to add the incremental allowance. So basic precision is if there's no stop sharing here for a second. So the basic precision is that if there is no errors, if there are no misstatements, this could still be off by something because it's a sample. Incremental allowance is if there are errors. Notice that if nothing was misstated, there'd be nothing in the incremental allowance. Because this is based on misstatements. So if there were no misstatements, this is what we'd be looking at for the upper limit. But these two together will give us the upper limit. As far as what this could be off by. Okay. Well, I almost ended the class. You guys are thinking, oh man. All right. So basic precision, we take the sampling interval, which is how much? Oh, come on. I'm gonna start crying. It'll be really awkward. Okay, it's 5,000. So the sampling interval is 5,000. Oh, let's try something else. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is 5,000. And the reliability factor at 0 overstatements. We got to go down to the table thing here. What percentage are we looking at? 10%. And wait, on the test, make sure you check this, because if this changes, it'll change down below. So 10%. Reliability factor. So this is for basic precision. So 2.31. Okay, so 2.31 times 5,000. $11,550. Okay, so going back to here, so even if there was no errors found, it could still be up by 11,550 more because of it's a sample. You know, we didn't take 100%, so. Okay, incremental allowance, the craziest thing you'll ever see in your life. Take overstatement 1 minus overstatement 0 minus 1, that'll give us the factor, and then we'll have to multiply it by the misstatements, which we'll get to in a second. So let's go ahead and do the factor. So it's coming down to this table. So at 10%, we're going to take the overstatements 2. Now notice, so this is the first overstatement. So it's incremental over the what we use for the basic precision. Notice the basic precision was at 0. Right, because that's if you have no you have no misstatements to be here. But now if we do have misstatements, we're going to go to the increment above this. So it'll be this minus that minus 1. It's just the formula. Just that quick, I forgot. 3.89. Minus overstatement 2, which is 2.31. Minus 1 equals. And again, I should just make an incremental chart. That's what this should do. 5.8. So we're going to take 0.58 times. We only have one on here. There's only one yes. You take the largest one. In this case, it's the only one, 3,000. So you take 3,000 times 0.58. Those aren't zeros. 5.8 times 3, 1, 2, 3. 1740. So that'll be the incremental allowance. And by the way, why I was saying that this one, the projected balance is 0, it wouldn't matter because if you took 0 times anything, it would matter down here. So anyway, we don't need these other two. Okay, so now
I have a question.
Yeah,
Why don't we need why don't we need the second one for that $900 misstatement?
it's not
Or is that
included.
just be, oh, right, right. Okay, thank you.
And that is a weird one. I mean, it is a weird thing to think about. And but yeah, the idea is that nothing else could go wrong in that interval. So this one, more stuff could go wrong in it. You know, how much more stuff? 3,000. And so then they say, okay, well, we'll come down here, we'll plug that in, and it'll be multiplied by some factor, you know, whatever the factor whatever it is, and then that'll be our incremental amount. As far as the nuts and bolts of calculating this is definitely not intuitive. You know, this method. So 17,190. And so coming back to this thing, $1740 was it? So this could be 1740. So, you know, these are the additional amounts that it could be off by. So 17. So 3,900 is our best estimate, what it's off by, but it could be off by as much as 17,190. And this is up for 400,000. So is that material? It's a judgment call. But so 1790 would be the upper limit on it. Ah. Any question on that? Okay. Who wants to call it a night? Hey, me too. It's unanimous. I think I'm just gonna sit out. We got like, I don't know, 21 minutes left. I think I'll just send it out, and then we'll hit the general control next class. So again, the Deloitte CPA firm Zoom meeting on Thursday at 4 p.m. Excellent. I sent out an email with the link to it. Excellent thing to join the Zoom meeting. Getting in with Deloitte is one of the best things you could possibly do for your career. They're a Big Four accounting firm. They've also ventured into a lot of different areas, a lot of creative areas and all kinds of stuff. They do all kinds of consulting, and really good firm to be in with. And even if you don't stay in the firm, just having that on your resume will open up virtually every door in accounting that you can think of. So I would highly recommend you at least sit on the meeting and just see what it's about. I know I am going to be sitting in on it and seeing what it's about, but anyway, it's Thursday at 4 p.m. I sent it out in your email. There's a flyer that has the link in it. I also put the link, I think, in the email. But anyway, I strongly encourage that. So let's cross this out. So these two, we just did the sampling practice exam, so that'll be due. Well, you already did it, but it'll be due on next Friday, and then I'll send out this exam within 10 minutes. Any questions?
No.
Okay.
No questions.
Have a good evening, and I will send out the exam, and I will see you in a week. And I strongly encourage you, if you can make it. I know 4 p.m. is kind of a funny time if you're working and stuff, but if you can make it, I would say, try to, join that. So, okay. Talk to you guys in a week.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good evening.
Well, you too.